Di, it's very good to be talking with you. Indeed, it feels as if we're old friends because it was you who interviewed me for producing a press release when the new master was being elected. So I feel we know each other a little bit.
We do, yes. It was a great pleasure.
And looking back at your life so far, you were obviously born and brought up in Surrey, in Warton-on-Thames, and then you were at school in Chertsey. So did you spend the whole of your young life in that part of the world?
Yes, I'm a Surrey girl, born and bred. I was born into a family. I had 5 older brothers, and you know, parents. One was English and one was Kiwi, yeah. So I lived there. Although now I live in Buckinghamshire, in Penn. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you meet your husband after you'd left Surrey, so to speak, or?
Yes, yes. I had spent a time in Kent, and I met him at a Beaujolais Nouveau evening when I was working, and he lived in Ealing and I lived down in Kent. And actually, we decided on Penn because it was midway between London and the middle of nowhere, which is our different lifestyles at that point.
And was he neither a journalist nor a wine merchant?
No, in fact, the irony is he doesn't even like red wine. But yeah, no, he runs a trade body for the automotive industry. So that's what
right.
Quite a different industry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you went off to university at Birmingham. Is that
yeah,
right?
I did. I got a history degree up there, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was a real privilege to do 3 years of just a subject that you're actually interested in and love. It was mainly sort of medieval and mainly social history, really. But I went to a grammar school, and there it was very much a question of you must go to university. And there wasn't much careers advice. So I just did the subject that I was best at without really thinking where I was going with it. So I only really decided to try and be a journalist after I had finished at university, which is the wrong way round because it doesn't prepare you properly. You should be doing things like working for local papers or working on the rag at university. Yeah.
And did you live in Hall at Edgbaston, or were you in Diggs, or what?
I was in Diggs the first year, and then I had a fantastic flat. First year we were 5 of us, and second year 4 of us, and I'm friends with them to this day. You know, we see each other regularly. It's lovely. Yeah.
I must ask you this: have you read any of the novels of David Lodge?
I haven't. I'm sorry about that. He's not.
No, don't worry.
Well,
I must encourage you, because he was a professor of English at Birmingham for a very long period.
Right. Okay. I think I've got Death Sentence. That's one of his, isn't it? I think that's on my bookshelf.
Yeah, that's a slightly somber one. That's his last one. But I would suggest something like How Far Can You Go?
Right. Okay.
Or Changing Places. He calls the University of Birmingham the University of Rummage. But his earlier novels are very funny, but they also have a real grit to them.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, is it really when you went to Birmingham that you left the environs of London, or?
Yes. I then moved up to Balham in South London and worked in the West End and then down in Twickenham. And also it was when I went to work in Kent that I moved down there to between Tunbridge and Sevenoaks, and had a lovely little cottage there overlooking sheep and horses. It was marvellous.
And that's where you met Dave?
Yes, that was at the time I met Dave, yeah.
There, yeah. And you then went into, you worked for a thing called British Shipping?
British Shipper, yeah.
Shipper.
And that was really interesting because it was my first job, and it gave you an insight into a lot of different industries. I had to go and find out how they shipped cream eggs and how they shipped whiskey, how they even shipped zoo animals, and, you know, making sure giraffes didn't go through low bridges and things. But I also had a fantastic amount of travel. I went to Ghana, to Israel, to Spain, all sorts of different places. So it was a brilliant first job, and it was a monthly. And, you know, you know, I then wanted to get weekly experience. So it was then that I moved off into the weekly world after a couple of years. Yeah.
What was the first thing you did in the weekly world? That was.
Well, I went to Haymarket Publishing, and I told them that I wanted to have weekly experience, and they said, yeah, you can have a job and we can offer you either newsagent or litho week. And I'm actually 5th generation in print in my family. And when they said litho, I said, oh, I know what that is. And in a way, my fate was sealed at that point, because I got into an industry which my family had been in, and my two of my older brothers that were in. And I didn't look back. I actually became addicted. I love the industry because I think it's an industry where people really work hard, compete hard, but actually are convivial. They actually respect each other, and it's tremendous. I think it's technical. It's something everybody who prints seems to be so proud of what they do. It's useful. It's informative. It's educational. It's brilliant. Yeah. So that's how I got into print.
And when you talk about the printing industry, I mean, were you actually involved in, Olive, you would have engaged with people in every form of printing, not just newsprint, but book publishing?
Well, really, it was about the production side of print. So right. Yes, they would be producing all types. So and you know, it could be litho, flexo, gravure, and actually it could be books, newspapers, packaging, all sorts of different things. So I mean, that's the joy of being a journalist, is you have the absolute breadth of sight, and you have to know a bit about everything. When I became a PR, that was the big difference, was suddenly you're working for a few companies and you get to know the depth of something and the depth of the subject and so on. So yeah, that was the difference really. But I was 10 years writing about print, and both Printing World and Print Week as it is now, because Litho Week became Print Week. Yeah.
So while you were in the printing industry, were you there for the revolution, so to speak, that's happened?
Yeah, Eddie Shah was there. I mean, and he was definitely a revolution in the arrival of colour and so on. And I was also there at the beginning, very beginning of the digital world. But obviously, I left just about as that was taking off, with the arrival of sort of Indigo and Zycon and things like that. And so yeah, but I've watched and enjoyed that revolution enormously. I mean, it's really good actually now, because you know, you have the best of both worlds. You have the litho for the long run manufacturing, and you have the digital for the shorter run and specialist work, and yeah.
So when you were there, was it still hot metal and 3-color printing, or what?
No, it was we'd definitely gone to litho, full color, and yeah, I mean, it was pretty much full color and specials, and 2 parts. And then when I got into PR, and Heidelberg was my first client, we then started to see the arrival of these very long sheet-fed presses, you know, long perfectors, which could print both sides at the same time and things. So yeah,
extraordinary. So yeah, tell us, so you then formed your own firm, Plus Point, is that right?
Yes. What happened was, I had mentioned at some point to Wolfgang Gorth, the managing director of Heidelberg, that, you know, I thought at some point I would leave journalism, go into PR. And I was at an IPEX, I think it was probably about 1994, anyway, mid-90s. And he came to me and said, Di, I think we're going to need to talk to you soon. And so that was the start of it. And so that last year I celebrated 25 years of working for Heidelberg. And I worked under 4 different managing directors: Wolfgang Gorth, George Clark, and Gerard Henu, who's also a stationer, and now Brian Miles. And of course, Heidelberg are corporate members of stationers. And I know that over the years, they've really benefited from that. And they are very involved with the innovation awards. They put in an entry most years and so on. So yeah, so there is a good close association between Heidelberg. But, you know, to work for them for 25 years and to see them move from just a press manufacturer to a company which does pre-press, press, finishing, consumables, and throughout the digitization of print, it's been never a dull moment. It's been fantastic. And now I did actually relinquish Heidelberg last year along with IST and Epson, and I still work for PICON, the Printing Industry Confederation, which is the employer's body or trade body for all the suppliers of print manufacturing and also paper manufacturing. So I'm still involved, but I'm very much now sort of semi-retired and doing project work in PICON.
But Plus Point continues.
Plus Point continues, yes.
Plus Point continues. And yeah. Have you at certain points have other people working with you then, or
yes, I mean, when I first started Heidelberg, they only did printing presses and polar guillotines, so I was free to have quite a number of different clients. At one point, I did have 18 clients and 8 staff, and you know, it was a tremendous thing. But I had young children, and I had to make the decision at some point, and downsized, so kept a clutch of clients and came home back to my home office, and have worked there on my own now for quite a few years.
Now, one thing you did, which I thought was really interesting, and I don't think anyone else has done it so far, is when we were looking at giving me some background, you actually said, well, you noted a few people who you particularly admired, and I'll excuse his blushes, I hope, but William Alden was one of them, but also Roy Coxhead. Can you tell us a bit about Roy?
Yes, Roy was my editor at Printing World, and he used to send us off to press conferences, but we always had to ring in, and he'd say, right, what's the story? Now, what that does is gives a chance if you haven't got the story, or you're explaining something, he'll say, well, why didn't you ask this? Why don't you go back in and ask it? But also it meant that you really focused on what your story was. It taught you to be a better writer, and it made it easier when you got back with the story to write it up. Later on, he became my non-exec chairman at Plus Point PR, because he's a man who's very good with people, very good with ideas. He's now 90. He's in Kenilworth with his wife Pat, and even now he still gives me suggestions and ideas. So he's been a tremendous influence on my career.
It's a lovely thing to be able to do, to say that who are the people I've admired. I think we could all do that a bit with saying, who are the people who've influenced us, you know, where have our ideas come from? And I suppose it sounds as if he's one of them.
Yes, he's one of them. I really do respect the trade press. You know, I get quite upset when people criticize them, because they have an awful lot of work to fill those publications and to do their daily news stories and everything. And they do make mistakes occasionally, but when they make mistakes, it's very public and people get very hot under the collar about it. But they're all doing a tremendous job, and their knowledge and their enthusiasm is fantastic. But people like Joe Francis and Daryl Danieli, Gareth Ward, Susan Wright, Simon Eccles, such a depth of knowledge, such a tremendous cohort of good journalists in our business. And, you know, we should be proud, because they always say, you get the trade press you deserve. So, you know, pat on the back to us.
And when did you move then from Kent up to Buckinghamshire?
When I met Dave, we had this thing about where we're going to live in the country or in the town. And so we came to Penn, and we went to find somewhere to rent, and we were sent down to this little cottage in Penn, and we were shown around by this chap called Paul. And at the end, he said, by the way, I should tell you, my wife is Mary Berry. So we actually stayed in Mary Berry's cottage for the first year. And we actually got married from there, and they came to our church service. And she moved off to Henley last year. But before, I used to meet particularly Paul, because he and I are both dog walkers. So we'd often meet in the woods as we were walking our dogs. And we still exchange Christmas cards. Yeah, she, you know, and the lovely thing is she's just got a damehood, which I'm delighted about. But she is, what you see on the television is who Mary Berry is.
Yes, she's just as good, as it were.
Yeah.
And so did you every now and again get a nice cake cooked for you or something?
We did have an occasional one, because she used to film in her kitchen. There used to be spotlights in our drive to make the lighting right inside. And occasionally when she'd done that, she'd pop over with a cake.
It's interesting. I hadn't realised that her career on the television has been as long as it has then.
Yes, I mean, she certainly, when we were there, and I'm talking 25 years ago, or longer than that actually, she certainly wasn't an A-lister at that stage. She certainly, it was Bake Off that really took her up into the becoming a national treasure.
Yes, 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 which I suppose you would say she was now, yeah. And then, but you've been a stationer now for, is it 25 years you've been a liveryman?
Yes, well, last year, actually, I've got a letter just beside me, but William wrote to tell me, which I was absolutely delighted to know that I had been. I was sponsored by Roy Coxhead, who we mentioned earlier, and the late Bert Smart. And I think I initially came into stationers because of the networking opportunities and so on. But I've got so much more out of it. I absolutely love some of the events, particularly the Richard Johnson service. I think that's tremendous every year, and then walking up to the hall to have lunch. I actually even love the smell of Stations Hall when you arrive, and it's sort of rather woody with a bit of brass polish. And I love that, and I love seeing those rather portly, prosperous portraits as you go up there, up the stairs and so on, and the stained glass windows. I love the whole sense of history. I'm always proud. I take my brothers, I've taken various journalists, I've taken friends, and I'm very proud to be a stationer.
Yeah, they are good pictures. The one that I always seem to have my eye focusing on is Luke Hansard, who was his name now endures, of course, because of the report, the daily reports on the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Mm-hmm. But then you were a founder member, I think, of the marketing committee.
Yes, me and William, actually. William, I think, was the chairman initially, and it was rather, should we do this? How should we do it? And so on. And so I had the first stint there, and then the second stint was some very good people again chairing it. I mean, Robert Flather, I know, was one. And I did really enjoy it, but it was, and I think we did quite a lot in our service. We increased the sort of media relations, we set up the website and so on, and refreshed the website and things. And there used to be, it always made me laugh, because the thing that always got most heated was what typeface for anything was used. Typefaces seem to be one of those things that people really care about stations. But no, I really enjoyed it. But for me, that was a little bit of a busman's holiday.
And is how long then has the marketing committee been going now then?
Well, I would really be guessing at that, to be honest with you, Stephen. I would think probably 15 years or something like that.
Right. So when William was chairing it, of course, he was a liveryman rather than a...
Yes, he was a liveryman. It was well before he became a clerk, so it's predates him becoming clerk. Yes. But he,
And do you have a favourite typeface then?
I can't get upset about typefaces. I prefer sans serif, if that helps.
Yes, it's funny. I know nothing much about them, but my father was an advertising manager, and so he knew a lot about that. And in fact, the main company at the time, or the main brand that he was responsible for, was Airtex.
Oh, right.
Used to make shirts and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they had a very strange typeface. I can't remember what it was called, but it had the right hand. I think it was the right hand stroke down was always very wide, and the left hand one was just a line.
Okay.
You'll know what I meant if you saw it. It's a very rather sort of an Art Deco style, I think, really.
All right, nice. Sounds good.
But presumably, when you see a text, you think, "Well, I wouldn't have put it in that font."
Yes, sometimes I do, but I'm much more likely to pick up about whether it's got an apostrophe S or an S apostrophe. I certainly proofread. Menus and things like that. I'm rather sad in that way. Yeah,
I know, I understand that. And yes, is there any one more thing that you'd like to see happen in stationers company that's come out of your own experience with the work over the years?
There's something that I'd like to continue, which, you know, I've always felt slightly passionate about. Having 5 older brothers, you almost are a feminist from the time you can walk. But I've always sort of slightly fought for women to have an equal role in the industry. And I think Stations has done a tremendous job of bringing more women on board. And you know, I'd like to see more diversity too, but I think we are working on all these things, you know, make them better. But that would really be the thing I'd like. And I certainly have seen in my lifetime that you know, the role of women has always been good in, don't get me wrong, it's always been good, I think, in publishing and in PR. But I think in print, you know, we're getting better, but we still need to see more people and more women represented at middle and senior management. And I think digitization has helped with that, because a lot of the digital suppliers have got a lot more women in higher roles. And I think that will impact on the traditional companies, which have perhaps been a bit slower.
That's a pretty good aspiration to leave us with, I think, Di.
Yes, militant feminist. No,
Right.
not at all.
Thank you so much. It's been great fun doing this.
Thank you very much, Stephen.